I can feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight, got pride, got reason. If they wanna go eat, then you know I'm gon' feed them. If you're coming for me, hope you're ready for a demon. I got eyes in the back of my head, I'm seeing. Take me for granted and you know I'm leaving. I'ma take what's mine with the webs I'm weaving. I could take this crowd from seeing to believing. Got a taste for blood and my tongue keeps bleeding from the words I spit. So sharp, so freezing, so cold. Behold, frostbite they feeling. I could take.
Hey beauties, welcome to True Crime Thursdays. I hope you guys are all doing great and having a great Thursday. Hey stranger, hey Joannie, Victoria, Care Bear, Tinkerbell's mom, Zoe. Did I say Victoria? I don't know, but how is everyone doing? I'm glad to see you guys here. So, I'm going to start off by saying this. There's definitely going to have to be more than one part to this. I'm actually still in the middle of reading a book, and I just want to break this down into two. There's no way I'm going to be able to cover this all in one video or live stream, whatever you want to call it. So this is going to be part one. The one thing I am going to tell you guys is not that your kids would be up this late, but no kid should listen to this. This is about a very, very brutal case with two monsters, and I just don't think any kid should hear it ever in life until they're adults. So if you have any kids around, please tell them to go away while you enjoy listening to true crime by yourself. Okay. Secondly, viewer discretion is advised for this case, and this is the whole way through. As many parts as this has to be, which it'll probably only be two, but viewer discretion is advised. There are triggers in here, obviously. So I want to let you guys know that. And that's pretty much it for now. But this is, yes, it's a very intense, brutal case. So intense that it can definitely put you into a very, very, not depression. I don't want to say depression, but it definitely can make you feel like, how could we know evil exists, right? But it's reality when you're researching. When I'm researching these cases, it becomes reality. And true crime is very new to me. I mean, I've always loved true crime, but it's very new to me to deep dive into these types of cases. So there's always going to be some cases that are worse than others. And this one is bad, very, very bad. So if you are familiar with the, what the heck's their name? Ian, I forget, but it's another couple that I'm going to go ahead and say that killed children. And I'm pretty sure, I cannot remember the last names, but it's Ian and Myra. Okay. And it's like a killer couple case. And from research, as psychologists have researched killer couples, what they have found is that killer couples usually, statistically, their crimes are the most brutal compared to like a serial killer, who, works on his own. They say that killer couples crimes are the most brutal. And if you know Ian and Myra, if you look them up, Ian and Myra Hensley, something like that, that's another case I'm going to be covering, but they were the worst. Like, I think they probably are even worse than Carla and Paul. But the reason why I've always been very intrigued by this case is what happens in the end. So that's something you guys are going to have to wait for, because what happens in the end is devastating. It is a tragedy, because I'm not going to ruin it, but that's Ian and Myra Brady. So I just feel like this case is the most intriguing because of what happens in the end, and justice was not served in this case. Let's put it that way. Only one way, not the other. So in order for me to talk about this case, I want to take it to the past a little bit. And I think it's important when you are deep diving serial killers and things like that. This is not going to be the first, and it definitely isn't going to be the last. We have covered Jeffrey Dahmer, but what I'm saying is that the only way that you can know or even try, which you can never relate to people like this, but I think it definitely gives you more of a perspective when you take it back to someone's childhood. Okay. So how I look at this couple is pure evil. Pure evil. And some people interpret evil differently. Like, what is evil? So if you look up evil, it's profoundly immoral and wicked. And evil, in a general sense, is defined as the opposite or absence of good. It can be an extremely broad concept, although in everyday usage, it is often more narrowly used to talk about profound wickedness and against common good. And I really truly feel that that's what evilness is. I think everyone, they interpret evilness in a very, very different way. But in the same sense, it's about good and evil in this world, ultimately. Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolko are the epitome of evil and everything inhumane, in my opinion, in this world. The crimes that Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolko committed will chill you to the core. It will. This is the story of Canada's most horrific serial killers. They are responsible for 18 sexual assaults and 3 murders. Now, Paul alone is responsible for 18 sexual assaults. However, the 3 murders did not start until he met Carla Homolko. Homolko, I can never say her name right, but that's pretty much how you say it, I guess. Homolko, whatever. Who cares? She's irrelevant anyway. Except for to this story. I can't stand that woman. But anyway, so I want to take it back a little bit because I feel like that is going to give you a little bit of perspective of Paul's life and how it almost seems as though Paul, he definitely had a very troubled childhood. However, Carla, they say, had the perfect childhood. I disagree. I disagree. And if you watch Stephanie Harlow, excuse me, and her coverage on this case, I definitely agree with her. Whereas if you look deeper into the things that Carla Homolko did when she was younger, teenager, if you look really deep into it, yes, she definitely had parents that were very well off. You know, they lived in a great neighborhood, things like that. But deeper, I do think that the things that Carla witnessed from her parents definitely contributed to turning her into the monster that she also is. So let me grab my notes here. Good point. You got to look at their lives to understand why they became that way. People aren't born evil, but that nothing that happens in their lives excuses that fact. They choose to become. Thank you. You're very, very right. You definitely got to take it back a little bit. And I know that some people, you know, I'm not going to be going too deep into his childhood, but I do think it's necessary to take it back to key moments in his childhood that would make you guys say, you know what I'm saying? Like, that definitely makes a lot of sense, because there are things that happened in his childhood. First of all, Paul Bernardo, his father, Kenneth Bernardo, was also a sexual predator. And I think that says a lot, and reveals more about Paul himself. His mother, there's just so many things. So I'm going to break it down for you guys. So hold on, let me bring up my notes. 1 second here. Okay. Sorry, you guys, this is typed. Some of my notes are typed, so I have to go to the specific parts of where I talked about Paul's childhood, and then we'll talk about Carla's childhood. But it's not going to be like in depth. I just want to give you guys some certain key points that happen in Paul's life that you guys will, I don't know. I don't think there's any excuse for the things that he's done, but I do think that his childhood definitely was toxic in a lot of ways, especially with his father and his mother. So hold on 1 second while I pull it up. It's all typed on my iPad. That's still no excuse if you were violated as a child. That doesn't give you a license to become a predator. Absolutely not. No, none of these things are excuses. However, I do think taking it back to a person's childhood shows it shows the things, because I agree with James. Nobody is born a killer. Nobody is. I don't agree with that. I think there are some people who are doomed right from the start, but I think a lot of behaviors are learned. You know what I mean? I truly, truly believe that. That doesn't excuse it. It never excuses it, but it does definitely put things into perspective of their childhood and how, like I said, Paul's own father was a sexual predator. He molested his own daughter. And these are things that Paul witnessed growing up. And he knew these things. And he had, even at one point, you guys will see, was very in defense of his father when his father was finally prosecuted for um, doing what he did to his own daughter. All of these notes that I took, hold on. You'll hear silence, but that's just because I'm looking for something. Hold on. Okay. You guys ready? If you are exposed to sexuality too early, too early in development, especially if it was a violent or repeated, it can drastically wrap someone's psychology. I agree. I agree. I think some people are literally born psychopaths and some people are put through the trauma and become a psychopath. I agree. I do think that it definitely, I don't know about the born. And that's something that I struggle with. I think that these types of behaviors are learned. But let's start off here, okay? Some of the books that I got this from was I'll put them in the description. One of them is Deadly Illusion, I think it's called. Oh, I'm sorry, Invisible Darkness, one of those books. And then there was another one, Ken and Barbie, the serial killers. So I got this from a series of different books, not a series, a couple books, and one of them I'm actually still reading. So these are notes that I took from this book, things that I have learned from documentaries, things like that. And that's why I'm saying there is just no way that I can just squeeze all of this in one live stream. Not if I want to break this down to you guys. I want to break it down properly so you guys can kind of get a vision and understand. So sit back and relax and enjoy. Okay. You really can't enjoy too much. You know what I mean? You really can't enjoy hearing about these horrible monsters, but in the same sense, it's true crime. And I know some of you guys who voted for me to do true crime, you like true crime. So, okay. So, Carla Homoko thinks obviously that Paul Bernardo is just like a dream come true, like probably one of the best boyfriends that she ever had. He literally swept her off her feet. As most people say, it was lust at first sight. The one guy who was always nice to Carla, who never bored her, because Carla is a very, very much type, excuse me, type A personality. And then you have Paul Bernardo, who's very much a type A personality as well. Paul Bernardo definitely was a more dominant personality. And then you have Carla Homoko, who was very much a controlling personality. So it's very interesting to see that these two couples collide in the way that they did, because they're both very controlling people. And that usually doesn't work, and it usually turns into a disaster. Just saying. Not always, but most of the time. So Carla, she knew from the moment that she met him that she was going to marry Paul Bernardo. Now, Paul Bernardo was born a bastard on August 27th. You guys will understand that in a minute. On August 27th, 1964, at Scarborough General Hospital in the suburbs of Toronto. He had also been very ugly. There will be a reason to why these things are mentioned, and you guys will understand in a minute. There was nothing abnormal about Marilyn Bernardo's 39-week pregnancy. So Marilyn Bernardo is Paul Bernardo's mother. Paul Kenneth was a 20-inch long baby, 8 pounds, 10 ounces, and he had a huge black mark covering his entire left side of his head. It was very grotesque. His mother cried out with horror the first time she seen him when he was born. She was very, very much like, obviously, as a mother, when you first see your beautiful child, you're just like, so in love, and then obviously Marilyn, she's seen her child, and he has this huge birthmark covering the left side of his face, and she was very, very worried, concerned, but also very scared. And some of the things that I feel like she said out loud were things that she shouldn't have said out loud, because that's still her child. So it gives you some kind of an indication of how Marilyn was. The hospital records show his parents to be Marilyn Elizabeth Bernardo and Nee Eastman and Kenneth Walter Bernardo. But the records are not entirely accurate. Marilyn Bernardo was not really an Eastman. She was a Hamilton, and Paul was not Ken's son. So Kenneth Bernardo is not biologically his father. That's not Paul's real father, but he was raised to believe that was his real father until a certain point. Marilyn Bernardo was born Marilyn Joyce Hamilton, May 10th, 1940, in Kitchener, Ontario. Kitchener and its twin city, Waterloo, are enclaves of German immigration, approximately an hour drive west of Toronto Airport. Before the First World War, they were known as Berlin and Little Berlin. Marilyn's natural parents, Ross and Elizabeth Hamilton, put Marilyn and her two sisters, Claudia and Diane, and her brother, Richard, up for adoption. Marilyn never found out why. Neither did any of her siblings, but Marilyn got real lucky when Gerald and Elizabeth Eastman decided to adopt her. Gerald Ernest Eastman had become a big fish in a small pond. Born in 1901, he read law at Osgoode Hall in Toronto and was called to the bar in 1928. He joined the Kitchener Law Office of Clement, Hatton and Company. After World War II, he became a full partner. When he retired in 1980, his law firm was known as Clement, Eastman, Dreger, Martin, and Manu. I'm probably saying that wrong. I could be saying a lot of words wrong. I just write them down. You guys don't know what I'm talking about. On July 8th, 1931, Gerald married Elizabeth Riddell. They had one natural child, Marilyn's stepbrother, Charles. He was a senior Eastman soldier in World War II from 1939 until 1945, when he was honorably discharged as a lieutenant colonel. To hear Ken Bernardo tell it, Marilyn was abused in foster homes, and then she was raped. by at least 3 members of the Eastman family after she was adopted. But he had said these things much later on. He didn't reveal those in the beginning, but for the people who have interviewed him, he ended up telling this as time went on. To her friends, such as Elizabeth Christner, Marilyn was an outgoing and happy teenager who had been raised quiet, understanding. She had very understanding parents. Marilyn attended Westmount and King Edward Public Schools and then Ketchner Institute. After she graduated from high school, Marilyn went to work for Ontario Hydro. An attractive blonde, maybe a bit heavy in the thigh, Marilyn had a broad, open face, rather like the many beautiful girls who crowded the bustling Kitcher Farmers Market on Saturdays. She met Ken Bernardo in November 1955, an ignorant horse-playing Italian immigrant son. Kenneth Walter Bernardo had been born on January 29th, 1935, to Frank and Mary Bernardo. He was the youngest of 3 siblings. Ken's brother, Raymond Francis, had been born a decade earlier, and his sister, Shirley, in 1927. According to Ken, the Bernardo children endured a kind of minor holocaust of the nuclear family. As the youngest by 8 years, he suffered the least abuse, but remembered his childhood as troubled and difficult. His father was an old world Atorian who treated the children like stubborn mules. The old man and Ken's brother Raymond fought like warring fractions in the Italian parliament. Although Ken maintains the family struggled during the Great Depression, that too seems unlikely. By the time Ken was cognizant of his circumstances, it was at least 1940, and his father was prospering and starting to mellow. Born in northern Italy, Frank Bernardo came to Canada as an orphan at the age of 10. He married a woman of English descent and started what became a very successful marble and title company. Frank retired early, sold the business, and played the ponies for the rest of his long life. Ken's recollection is that his father stopped beating his mother when Ken was around 5 years old, but the relationship between his parents never was amicable. By the time the physical abuse and daily turmoil started to abate, Ken's brother and sister were in their mid-teens. In the 1950s, the Bernardos made the city paper. Raymond was caught out in a criminal behavior and he was arrested. The matter was widely reported and humiliated the family. Ken later said his brother was a sadist, twice diagnosed as a psychopath. Raymond eventually became a police officer. In 1957, Ken graduated from Wilfrid Laurier University with a Bachelor of Arts degree. That fall, he went to work at Pearson and Matthews as an accounting firm in Ontario. Although Marilyn was very, I don't know, she had this kind of, I don't know how to explain it, a lot of animosity towards Ken. In 1960, 10 days after his 20th birthday, she married him. So she knew him. There were things about him that she really didn't like, but she ultimately ended up marrying him. It was a small ceremony held with the Eastman's home in Claremont Avenue, a distinctly white Anglo-Saxon, Protestant, upper middle class address. The groom was 25, but he didn't have many friends aside from a couple of Marilyn's friends and immediate family. There were a few guests. So there's a reason why I'm telling you guys this. So stay with me here. Marilyn had been unable to make up her mind between Ken and another suitor named Bill. So he was a colonel, as her father was affectionately known. decided for her. Okay, Colonel Eastman had always been determined Marilyn would marry an educated man, and that left Bill out. The newlyweds moved into a tiny apartment at 266 Victoria Street. Following in his father's footsteps, Ken started smacking Marilyn around. So Marilyn was actually in love with someone else, and his name was Bill, but her father disagreed. Her father did not feel that Bill was educated enough for Marilyn, so that's when she was pretty much forced by her father to marry Kenneth Bernardo, which is Paul Bernardo's father, of course. The newlyweds moved into a tiny apartment, like I said, 2266 Victoria Street, following in his father's footsteps. In March 1961, they moved into a slightly larger apartment on, is it Athens Street? He smacked her around some more. On August 25th, Marilyn gave birth to their first child, David Breyer. Their daughter, Deborah Gale, was born the following year. On December 14th, 1962, Ken was still smacking Marilyn around when he passed his institute exams in 1963. In recognition of the fact that he was now a chartered accountant, the family moved into a little bungalow at 121 Wilford Street. Then Ken changed jobs and went to work for Rome and Haas Canada Limited on the outskirts of Toronto. Between the way he treated Marilyn and the amount of time he spent commuting, Ken spent commuting, studying, and work, it all became too much. Marilyn Bernardo remembers exactly what she was doing on the day Jack Kennedy was shot. She had sought and found refuge in Bill's arms. Thus, Paul Kenneth Bernardo was conceived. So, when a family member was shot, Marilyn ended up hooking up with another man, and that was Bill, the man that she was initially supposed to marry or wanted to marry, the man that she was in love with. She found herself being consoled by Bill, and they ended up, having intercourse that night. And it was not obviously her husband, which is Kenneth Bernardo. In early January 1964, the papers were full of stories about the Boston Strangler. His final victim, 19-year-old Mary Sullivan, had been found in her apartment, propped up in her bed. And you guys you don't want to know the rest. Right from the time Guy Lombardo and his Royal Canadian Orchestra struck up a band for the big red ball dropped in the Times Square, that wasn't much of a chance in 1964 was going to be a very happy new year. She considers Froggy a nickname. About 45 days later, after Kennedy took the bullet and Marilyn laid down with Bill, the ball dropped in the Bernardo household as well. Ken was resigned to his fate, but he would be damned if he would stay in a one-horse town and continue to be pretty much deprived. By January 29th, Marilyn, Ken, and their two young children, Debbie and David, were celebrating his 29th birthday in their new home on Abbeville Avenue in Scarborough, a sprawling strip-mailed suburb on the eastern flank of Toronto. Marilyn was withdrawn. What she could have been thinking, no man in his right mind wanted a woman with two small children, and Bill was no exception. She had never lived anywhere other than Kitchener. Married to a man who ignored and beat her, isolated her from her family and friends with two small children and another man's child in her belly, she was totally alone. So, obviously, as you guys can see, Marilyn, she was abused by Kenneth. Kenneth Bernardo abused her, smacked her around. He isolated her from all of her family and friends. So, even if she wanted to leave him, She felt as though, especially back then, that was kind of frowned upon to be a single mother with 2 children and one in her belly that wasn't even her husband's baby. So she didn't know what to do, and I think any woman who is in that type of relationship, those are, the kind of questions that they have. What am I going to do? How am I going to survive on my own? Because in a lot of ways, you become incredibly and completely dependent upon your partner. So she did want to leave him, but I think she kind of realized that, and it wouldn't have been that way for her though. You know what I'm saying? But I think in her head, she looked at it like, okay, nobody else is going to want me. So I'm just going to stay with Kenneth Bernardo, which was obviously a big mistake on her part. And you guys will see that later on. The mark on baby Paul's head turned out to be exactly what the obstetrician had said it was, a large transient blood clot. It faded from his face 6 weeks after he was born. In her diary, Marilyn described Paul as her easier child, much quieter than the other two. As her friend Elizabeth pointed out, to the detriment of their friendship compared to the other two, a pack of hyenas would be considered quiet. Not that their friendship mattered anymore. Anyway, Elizabeth and her husband David were very surprised to be asked to be the godparents when Ken and Marilyn had Paul baptized at St. John's Anglican Church in Kitchener on November 29th. They reluctantly agreed for old time's sake. They had stopped socializing with the Bernardos long before they moved to Scarborough. The Marilyn Elizabeth that they once knew had become increasingly sullen after her marriage. This Kenneth Bernardo person was very quiet, and his temper, he had a pretty lackadaisical temperament. When he did say something, it was very negative. You guys know those negative people that you come across where anything that they say is just negative. They don't have anything positive to say. Everything is always negative, like a Debbie Downer. Paul was a year old when the Bernardos moved to 21 Sir Raymond Drive in Scarborough, Guildwood Village. For Marilyn, this was the next best thing to going home. Another quiet, predominantly white, middle-class neighborhood. It sat on the edge of the bluffs overlooking Lake Ontario. The 2-story house had a carport and a big front window. Ken began budgeting for an in-ground backyard swimming pool. This one is not the least bit affectionate, Marilyn wrote in her diary. She described her youngest child as very selfish and stubborn and listed his allergies: orchard grass, elm, ash, pollard, cotton linters. Then Marilyn discovered Paul couldn't talk. By 2.5, most children were talking a blue streak, stammers a lot. Marilyn dutifully noted. As it turned out, Paul's tongue was attached to his palate by a strange flang of skin, like the webbing on a duck's foot. He made sounds, but they were unintelligible, like nobody could understand him, more animal like than a human. So he basically, it was hard for him. Obviously, his tongue was attached to, you guys know what I'm talking about, that little thing right there. Anyways, it was hard for him to talk. Nobody can understand. Now, one thing I will say is that, like with my son, it was different for all three of my sons. But with our Josiah, he started developing like a little bit of a stutter. I think that's normal, but now he's getting over it and it's more of a pause now. I think that kids tend to grow out of that, but obviously for Paul, he had trouble communicating because of his tongue. It was like connected there. So I don't know if he got surgery or not. Did I put that down here? Hold on. Okay. Yeah, they did. So once they realized that Paul was literally tongue-tied, he was thoroughly examined. He was sent to a speech therapist named Bonnie Gross at the Scarsborough General Hospital. In her report, she noted that Paul had passed all other childhood milestones. It was natural that his inability to communicate caused him considerably frustration, which is understandable. All they had to do was snip the duck's webbing. On his grade 4 report card, his teacher described his academic performance as satisfactory, but said Paul failed to apply himself because he is a talkative nature. The Bernardos rejoiced, and they rejoiced because finally he was talking, even after he had gotten everything fixed with his tongue and everything. He was still very quiet, because it was something that he was used to. And then as he grew, he started talking a lot more. So that's why they were so happy to know that at least now he was communicating and being talkative a lot more. Paul had always loved himself. Even as an articulate child in primary school, his teacher praised his early penchant for neatness and accuracy. He grew up to be very beautiful. That is, I say, whatever your taste can be, whatever. He grew up to be very beautiful, talkative indeed, and many, many women loved him as he loved himself. Neat, and very beautiful. He found he found them at school or summer camp, at work, deliberately or by chance. There were Karen, Nadine, Lisa, Victoria, Kim, Joanne, Anna, Lenore, Laura, Lynn, and many, many more. They all agreed he was a silver-tongued devil. Basically, he managed to talk the pants off most women he met. Then one day, shortly after he started grade 10, for no reason he ever understood, his mother stormed into his room, threw a photograph of a man on his bed, and told Paul he wasn't who he thought he was at all. He was not Ken Bernardo's son. He was really this man's son. She said he was a bastard and he might as well get used to it. So I feel like that's a very, very important part. And even reading Invisible Darkness, it's underlined. I think that was a key moment in Paul Bernardo's life, because here his mother is. He never knew, you know, he always thought, okay, Ken Bernardo, that's my father, right? His mother bursts into his room, has a picture of another man that he has no idea who this man is, throws the picture on his bed, and says, "You're a bastard. Okay? You're not who you think you are." That is very, yes, Heather, that's very cruel. That's awful. That's an awful way to tell someone that they're not who they think they are, and the father that they've been loving and adoring for as long as they can remember, obviously, is not their biological father. So I think that is very important to keep in mind as we go deeper into this case, what his mother did to him that day. Looking at the picture on his bed, it was like looking into a mirror. The guy in the photograph looked exactly like him. Paul was both repulsed and fascinated. His mother was a real bitch, just like his father said. Sometimes his father would sit on the couch. It did not matter whether they had company or not. When his mother came lumbering down the stairs, his father would say something like, "Boom, boom, boom. Look out, here comes the big fat cow." At the time, his mother was living like some giant troll in the basement. She never fed them. She hid food under her bed. There was never any food in the refrigerator. It was very, very a huge change from her, because she didn't always used to be like this. His father did not want to be eaten out of a house and home. Excuse me. His friend Chris Burt didn't really, and this is Paul's friend, his name is Chris Burt. He didn't really believe Paul until he came over one day and he saw with his own eyes Paul went to Sir Wilfrid Laurier Collegiate Institute. I don't even sometimes remember what I write. He was in grade 10. So was Chris. To Chris, Paul seemed so together. Like he had this fascinating life. You know how you see that child, not child, but when you're growing up and you're trying to find your own identity, you're trying to find yourself. And there's always that person that you look at like, man, they're so well put together. I wish I could be like that. I wish I could be well put together like they are and be so sure of myself and be so confident and have great parents and a great house, because he did. Paul lived in an amazing house with a backyard in-ground swimming pool and, just a beautiful house that obviously Kenneth Bernardo worked very, very hard for. So to Chris, he always admired Paul, and him being well dressed. The girls liked Paul. Every girl liked Paul. Paul had even introduced Chris to his girlfriend, Nancy McIan. And here he was living in an incredibly filthy house with no food in the cupboards, and there was his mother blinking in a dim half light at the bottom of the stairs. She had big puffy eyes and her hair stood on end like a Brillo pad. Paul told Chris about how his father would sneak downstairs in the middle of the night to have S with it. Kenneth Bernardo referred to his own wife, Marilyn, as it. Then he would run back upstairs to his own bedroom. Marilyn slept in the basement. Kenneth Bernardo, her husband, slept on the main floor. Paul never told Chris or anyone else that his old man was also sneaking out of the house, trying to look in the neighbor's daughter's window. Now, this is Paul Bernardo seeing his own father sneak out of the house to look into a window, okay, of a teenager. One night in June, Kenneth Bernardo snuck out and he got caught. The police came to the door and it was 3 a.m. They asked old Ken what he thought he was doing, prowling around at night, dark clothes, peeping into other people's windows. Apparently, the 26-year-old woman in whose basement bedroom window he was trying to peek, so this was a 26-year-old woman, had been sitting outside her house in her girlfriend's car at the time. She watched Ken come out of the house, cross the street, go up her driveway, and walk right into her window without any hesitation, meaning he had done it before. Her blinds were closed, so he gave up and scurried right back to his home on 21 Sir Raymond Drive. He was wearing white pajamas with a blue pinstripe. The woman freaked out and called the cops. There had been rumors in the neighborhood about him, but she had never believed them because he was friendly. He was friendly with her father. The old man was stressed right out that night. Like he was pretty much very stressed, going crazy. Ken stood at the door, shaking, and his Coke bottle glasses were all fogged up. The cops took note. They no more believed his lame cockamamie story about how he had been woken up by a noise and having to check it out. They didn't believe that story. But there wasn't much that they can do except warn him and write up a report, which is actually ridiculous. Then there was the business with Paul's sister, Debbie. Now, this is obviously Paul's older sister and Kenneth Bernardo's real daughter. Debbie did not remember exactly when the sex stuff started, but she knew it had been going on long before her mother got sick and her parents started sleeping in separate bedrooms. It just got a lot worse after they moved back from Barrie. Her father had taken a job in Barrie and moved the whole family up there for a year. And then they all came back to their old house on Sir Raymond, and everybody was happy. Debbie was 10 years old. Her little brother, Paul, who had always been a little different, suddenly became outgoing and talkative. He had started playing soccer, and when they were in Barrie, and he signed up for a Guildwood League when they came back to Scarborough. He joined the Cub Scouts. He started playing baseball in the community house leagues. Ken Bernardo even started coaching the team. That lasted about a year. Like Debbie, Paul started to swim seriously. Hold on one second. Okay, so like Debbie, she started like, wait, where am I at? Ken Bernardo even started coaching the team. And then Paul started to swim seriously. He took it seriously. He took lessons at the YWMCA or YMCA. In the end, they both got a national lifeguard certificates. On the on the surface, everything appeared very normal, but it wasn't. Marilyn Bernardo became really mean and she looked different. Her skin dried out. It felt like the sandpaper on Ken's workbench in the basement. Debbie's mother was also yelling all the time. Her hands and face and eyelids puffed up. Her nice, shiny hair grew dull and brittle, and her fingernails were a funny color. And Marilyn Bernardo got really obese. Debbie knew her mother was sick, that it that it wasn't her fault, but she didn't understand what a thyroid was. For some reason, areas around the Great Lakes, and particularly Lake Ontario, on whose shore they lived, were the most frequent sites of thyroid disorders in the world, which is very interesting. Even if Debbie had understood, it wouldn't have made any sense or any difference to her. Her mother started staying in her room all the time with the curtains drawn and the lights were off. She stopped cooking and doing chores. Both her mother and her father told Debbie she would have to try to start doing things around the house. She would have to learn how to do these things before and after school. Debbie was not very good at cooking and cleaning, and her mother was always yelling at her and her brothers. Their father would tell them that it wasn't their mother's fault that she was sick, but then he would make fun of her and call her a bitch. So in one breath, he's telling, the kids, just because she's yelling, she's sick, please don't treat her any kind of way. Please understand that she's sick. But in the same sense, here's Kenneth Bernardo making fun of her and making fun of her weight, something that she really couldn't control, and saying horrible things, putting Marilyn down. And that could be part of the reason why she became so isolated, even more isolated than he isolated her. And she stayed downstairs in the basement. And the only time Kenneth Bernardo would come down in the basement is to have sex with her and then would go right back upstairs. It was a very dysfunctional family, very, very horrible. And mind you guys, these are all things that Paul Bernardo is witnessing firsthand as a child. Okay, where did I leave off? Okay, so her father, which is Kenneth Bernardo, started sneaking into Debbie's room at night. His own daughter sneaking into her room at night. He told her not to tell her mother because it would make her angry. Because Debbie was a heavy sleeper, she started putting shells and old coins and metal garbage cans and lodging the garbage can in front of her bedroom door. She slept with the flashlight. When her father tried to open the door, there would be hell of a racket, obviously. And she would shine the light in his face. Debbie always made sure her curtains were closed because he used to climb out on the roof and try to watch his own daughter undressing at night. He would say he was just checking the eaves, even though it was dark. She remembered it occasionally happened during the week, but the garbage can thing seemed to help. It seemed to stop him from going in there and violating his own fucking daughter. Then there was Sunday night. Every Sunday, the whole family would settle down in front of the TV to watch Walt Disney. And her mother would lie down with the boys, and her daddy would call her over. So he would call Debbie over. He would sit there and violate her underneath the covers with his fingers. You guys get the rest. While they watched Mickey Mouse. Sometimes it hurt, and she would say, ouch, Lord Jesus. What's going on there? Her mother would ask, right in front of everybody, right in front of the whole fucking family. He would violate his own daughter. Mind you guys, this is something that you're going to have to understand. I am going to get into details about some of the things that they've done, and I'm going to do that because I've seen that a lot of other creators haven't. And I understand why they haven't. I may not go in depth into details, but I am going to go into details because that is the only way that people are really going to understand the magnitude of how much of monsters Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka were. People need to know how sick and demented these people were. And the only way you're going to know is by knowing the details. And I will suggest some books that you will read where they get more graphic details, but there's a reason why these graphic details in the books, why these authors choose to be so detailed, because you need to know. You need to know what these victims suffered through. You need to know how horrible and how people like this, I just don't understand how things happen the way that they did towards the end of this case. Okay. So he would do this in front of the family. Ken Bernardo would violate his own daughter in front of the whole family underneath the covers. Okay. And sometimes, obviously, the mother would say, "What's going on?" But she never did anything. Okay. She may have knew. Okay. Maybe she knew, but she never did anything. Her own mother. They're all sitting there, and here he is violating his own daughter. The mother's on the other side of the couch, and all she's saying is, "What's going on?" but never did anything. And it's horrible. It's horrible. And mind you, there's Paul Bernardo witnessing all of this. This is so interesting. Even though I am Canadian, I do not know this much about the background of Paul. Well, and I'm going to suggest some books to you guys too. I just feel like if it's important to go to people's backgrounds, because then it starts kind of not making sense, because things like this can never make sense, you guys. The things that these horrible people have done, it can never make sense. However, it can definitely say, if you know the specifics of the case, it can definitely make you say, "Oh, okay." It's very important to go to people's past. Absolutely, the mother had to have known. Like, how could you not know? Here he is sitting right next to his own daughter. You can't see his hands. And the mother saying, "What's going on over there?" So, yes, even though she was being very much mistreated, I wouldn't feel too bad for Marilyn as the mother, because there are so many things that she could have done that she didn't do. Okay. Where did I leave off at? Okay, so once during the day, when Marilyn had taken Paul and David out somewhere, Ken cornered her in the small bedroom upstairs and laid down on top of her and started going through the motions. "What are you doing?" Debbie demanded. "I'm making love to you," he told her. Squirming out from underneath, she managed to run off. It would be another 8 years before Debbie figured out how to run off for good. The revelation that Paul was a bastard had a devastating effect on him, but it was relatively invisible. He quickly realized that it gave him a certain, I don't know, particularly with girls, he selectively told. He created in him a difference that set him apart. Sympathy, but yet interest. But it was a cancerous fact, as much for the way in which he was originally told as for the way in which he subsequently handled, or rather not handled, this whole situation. Neither the man whom he knew to be his stepfather nor his mother would confront the issue. So, yes, his mother put the picture on his bed, told him in a very awful and demeaning way, but never talked to him after, never tried to ask him, "How do you feel? How does this whole thing make you feel?" Just told him that he was a bastard child. Um, Neither the man whom he now knew to be his stepfather nor his mother would confront the issue. He managed to find out his real father's name and that he had an insurance business in Kitchener, but that was it. His mother refused to ever discuss the subject. The only real change, whenever she yelled at him, which was often, she now called him the bastard from hell. her own son, that was the way she referred to Paul, the bastard from hell. Anytime she talked to him, he's the bastard from hell. Anything she'd say to him, he's the bastard from hell. Nancy McIan had a vivid memory of Noelle Francesca's grade 12 law school on the afternoon of January 24th, 1980. Not because of this, I don't even want to say it, severed head in the pail, but because of Paul Bernardo's question. This is a person who liked Paul, okay? Her name was Nancy. He was going out with her and her friend Anna. So he was dating two women. And Paul had introduced her to Chris Burke, the boyfriend Nancy would eventually marry. So Paul had a lot of girlfriends at one time, okay? He definitely was the type of person where okay, if you want to say he's good looking, I'll put up his picture in a minute. I wouldn't say that he was just, I don't think he was that good looking, but I guess back then people would look at him like a Ken like Barbie person, somewhat attractive. I've heard some people say that they think Paul Bernardo looks like Machine Gun Kelly. I don't know, but let me pull up his picture real quick. But that's where we're going to stop on Paul Bernardo's childhood, and then we're going to go to Carla's childhood. That's the wrong one. Hold on, because that was the wrong one. And you can get to see them both. The Ken and Barbie couple. I wouldn't say that. I mean, he's all right. I wouldn't say that he's like, ugly, but whatever. He's okay. I don't think either one of them are attractive, but I guess that's because I know what they've done. So it obviously makes me look at them differently. But ultimately, that pretty much describes Paul Bernardo and his life. What we kind of summed up to is that he definitely was in a very toxic situation with a very toxic family. He witnessed his father being a sexual predator himself, his own father, and he was doomed from the start, in my opinion, from the things that he witnessed. It doesn't always happen, but it definitely always happened a lot back then, statistically. And he definitely had a very, very tumultuous childhood, a very horrible childhood in a lot of ways. And I'm not talking about physically, mentally. The things that he sat back and watched, it was almost like he was doomed for it to happen to him. So there's where it comes down to. Paul Bernardo, this is learned behavior, because Kenneth Bernardo, being the sexual deviant himself, the sexual predator himself, that's not his real father. Okay. So then you go to genetics and all of those types of things. Ultimately, this is learned behavior, in my opinion. So now we're going to talk a little bit about Carla and her behavior, which is very interesting because she had a pretty good childhood. So let me bring up these notes really quick. You guys think he looks like Machine Gun Kelly? He definitely looks, yeah, I guess. I feel bad insulting Machine Gun Kelly that way, but, just because of the person that this man is, but I guess I can see the similarities between the two. But I don't think that she's attractive at all. I just don't. The way they keep this wonderful and attractive couple did this, and I can't believe it. I don't think she's attractive. I just don't. Like, looking at this woman, to me, I see nothing but evil. And I think I would see that even if I didn't know, or even if she didn't do this. She just looks like an evil woman to me. So, hold on, let me pull up these notes here. Okay. They look so suburban, generic, blah. Both of them have darkness in their eyes. The eyes are the window to the soul for a reason. I agree. I agree with that. You can look at them and tell they're very dark people. I think most people are just like, they're just the epitome of just this beautiful couple. And that's why they're called Ken and Barbie. And I'm just looking at them like, not really. And maybe back then I could see people looking at them that way, but now, no. You know what I'm saying? Her lips would need to be a little bit more bigger, because most people that it's admired these days is having like lip injections, which there's nothing wrong with that. But I'm just saying, I think the idea of beauty has definitely changed throughout. Not that it matters, because I think all women are beautiful in their own unique way. But looking at her, I just don't think she is. So we're going to go and talk about Carla. So Carla was interviewed by a psychiatrist named Dr. Is it Brandt? Something like that. Brandt. Dr. Arndt. I don't know. I'm saying it wrong. Dr. Arndt, whatever. Um, but he had interviewed Carla Homolko obsessively when all of this was going on, and he came to his own conclusions, which is interesting, and we'll talk about that towards the end. But to a lot of his conclusions, he definitely thinks that Carla is definitely a type A personality who's very, very obsessive. Like, he even diagnosed her, I'm pretty sure, with, is it ODD? Um, I think that's what it's called. But he just was very, very intrigued by who his whole idea of who Paul was, which was a very, very dominant uh, type A personality, and also Carla Homolko being like a type A personality as well. Carla's mother, Dorothy, um, delivered her troubled daughter to Northwestern General Hospital on March 4th at 11:30 a.m. Wait a minute. No, no, no. Wrong, wrong, wrong. Wrong note. Sorry, you guys. Thank you for joining us. Make sure. Yes, thank you guys. Hold on. I have to pull up. This is the wrong one I pulled up. I have so many notes, so many things I'm looking at right now. So hold on, you guys. Okay. So the homuncles talk about the whole family in general. Some of these I'm not going to be able to pronounce. Vaclav and Josefa, they immigrated to Canada in 1950 and settled around Woodstock, Ontario. Dorothy's future husband, Carol, okay, Dorothy is Carla's mother, and Carol is Carla's father, which is a very different kind of name for a man, but yes, that's her father's name, Carol, who was 7 years old at the time, had been born in Stokov, Czechoslovakia on January 25th, 1943. From the beginning, the homuncles were farm laborers, first on their sponsor's farm and then as internet workers. The whole area around Woodstock and along Lake Erie down toward Windsor produced tens of thousands of tons of tobacco a year. Then there was the fruit growers in the Niagara Peninsula. So this, I'm pretty sure that that's she looks like she's what is it, Czechoslovakia? I can never ever pronounce that right. Don't come for me, okay? There's a lot of words I can't pronounce right, so don't come for me. Hold on, I lost my place. Okay, so Carol and Carla's mother, they got married. By the time Carla was born, and she was born by a cesarean C-section at Massaja General Hospital on May 4th, 1970. Things were going better for Carol. He and his brothers were trading in trinkets and trash framed Elvises and mulatta girls on black velvet backgrounds from sidewalks and shopping malls. After Carla was born, Dorothy became a housewife. She would not return to work for 12 years. Carla's first sister, Lori, Priscilla, was born 14 months later on June 22nd, 1971. The homuncle's third and last child, Tammy Lynn, came along 2.5 years later on New Year's Day, 1975. Having constantly moved around Ontario since they were married in March 1975, the homuncles settled in St. Catharines trailer park. Although they would move a couple of times again within the small city, they would never leave St. Catharines. So they had 3 children. Keep in mind, the third child they had, her name was Tammy Homuncle. Like his father before him, Carol Homuncle became a self-employed traveling salesman, selling lamps and lighting fixtures to furniture stores around the province. While he moved from town to town, Carla grasped for breath. As a child, her father's namesake was severely asthmatic and frequently hospitalized. So Carla was very asthmatic. She was in and out of the hospital constantly when she was little, which obviously is something to think about because And I've noticed this, and I remember watching Stephanie Harlow and her saying this as well. If you ever notice with serial killers, they have suffered some kind of illness as a child. Um, Jeffrey Dahmer, he had some illnesses as a child where he was hospitalized. He had hernia surgery. Um, who else had illnesses as a child? I think Charles Manson may have had illnesses as a child. So I think also John Wayne Gacy had some illnesses as a child too. So I definitely think that that's something that psychologists, psychiatrists study, because there's definitely a connection there with serial killers and them, experiencing illnesses as children, because things were different back then. Medications were different. They weren't as advanced as they are now. Um, so there were a lot of side effects to medication that could be a contributing factor as to why, um, you know, some serial killers ultimately ended up the way that they have, due to some of the sicknesses that they've had as a child. So I think that that's very interesting. The attacks generally, Carla's asthma attacks generally occurred around the holidays, birthdays, and the start of school. Whenever Carla became excited or frightened, mother, as Dr. Arndt had taken to referring to Dorothy Homolka, said Carla was cute as a button. And if the snapshots I'm just going to call him Dr. A, saw were any indication it was true, blonde, wide eyed, here she is in her little pioneer girl's outfit, sweetly smiling, a portrait of innocence. Carla was precious. She talked early, walked early, and from the time she could walk and talk, she read. When tested in grade school, she scored a high intelligence score at 131. She scored high in the IQ testing. Carla Leanne Homolka was a very bright little girl. Throughout grade school, Carla averaged marks in the mid 80s. Her teachers routinely described her as eager and enthusiastic, a good student. Early on, Carla established what would become a lifelong academic pattern. Poor performance in math and sciences against her proclivity for English languages and related subjects. Paula also knew how to speak French. In 1978, the Homolkas moved into the house they still occupy today at 61 Dundonald Street. It was a new working class subdivision known as the Marionton, directly behind the Victoria Lawn Cemetery. The house seemed much larger than its tiny 800 square feet because it was split on 4 levels. To a family of 5 who had lived in a trailer parks and tiny apartments, it felt like the mansion on a hill. Obviously, if you're living in trailer parks, in a family of 5 and you find a home like that, which is a blessing, you're going to probably look at it as a mansion. To a family of 5, they ended up having, there was a deck and in-ground pool. So that's something that her and Paul shared through their childhood. They both had in-ground swimming pools, which was in a very small backyard for the Homolkas. Because there was a hydro right off way directly behind the house, they could hold on to an illusion of a more spacious circumstances. The Homolkas set a precedent that year on the 4th of May when they celebrated Carla's 8th birthday around the swimming pool. The pool became a focal point of their family life. From Carla and her sister Lori, Dr. A only heard about a non-combative, wonderful parents who were also very supportive and understanding. Okay, yeah. Most serial killers have childhood trauma, not seen much about childhood health issues, as a lot of children have health issues and not all become serial killers. Absolutely. It's crazy how that whole thing works, but I feel like a lot of serial killers, especially back then, when they would have like childhood illnesses and things like that, it's crazy how some obviously become serial killers and a lot don't, So Lori 21, it's very cliche how obviously Carla refers to her family as very understanding and supportive, but you have to look deeper. Excuse me. Lori 21 had taken courses to become a medical secretary, but now worked as a full-time checkout clerk at Zers. Like her sisters, she had blonde hair, which she often pulled into a ponytail. She told Dr. A that she looked a lot like her dead sister, Tammy Lynn, who was by far the most bubbly and attractive of the three sisters. From the pictures the psychiatrist had seen of Tammy Lynn, Lori was deceiving herself. Her tense little face was unfortunately dominated by her father's nose. Although she still lived at home, Lori claimed to be very independent-minded. Dr. A noticed that all her nails were bitten down to the quick. She said she had always bitten them. Both sisters agreed that their mother was a dominant parent, but their father had been deceptive. That was his inner strength. Lori thought her father needed help more than anyone, but he would never talk. Carla did confess to Dr. A that she had always had it in her mind that she would never marry a man like her father. A personality had nothing to do with it. He was always away and never had a steady paycheck. And of course, that's not something that Carla would like. Carla was so fixated on her perception of her father's shortcomings that she latched on to Arthur Miller's death of a salesman. For a grade 10 English project with two girlfriends, she made a rather innovative video that focused on the gormless qualities of Willie Loman. Carla's portrayal of Willie was startling, and it was a spitting image of her father. She played him as if he were a Steve Martin character, a wild and crazy guy. From Mother, Dr. A only heard about Carla that she was smart, sweet, attractive, fun-loving, outgoing, a leader, and also an instigator, always surrounded by friends, academically and socially successful. She was a daughter who liked her quiet time to read and think, and she loved animals. I don't agree with that. Carla actually trained their house cat to do tricks. Shadow, their big gray tabby, would sit up and beg or roll over on command. They always had a house full of kids, too. All Carla's friends kept coming around because Carla's friends liked being around, because Carla had rather cool parents that let a lot go on in the home, and you guys will know that very soon. Mind you, something did change when Carla got to high school. Mrs. Homolka told the doctor thoughtfully, although the kids still came to the side door in droves, Carla and her friends were no longer quite as open as they once had been. Dr. A thought ruefully that Mother might be having him on. Maybe she had learned a few tricks during that stint at the Lakeshore Psychiatric so many years ago. Teenagers are always less open than children. That was hardly a revelation. It's not. Children don't have any filter. They say anything and everything. You can't stop your child from saying things, like it's funny. They're very blunt. They say the darndest things, children do. But teenagers, when they become teenagers, they become more isolated. They become more aware of what they say. They become more secretive beast of just trying to figure out what's going on in a teenager's head. They're going through hormonal things, all different kinds of emotions. They're trying to find themselves, and they're unfortunately very quiet about that. And it's because they're trying to figure things out on their own. I've noticed a lot of male serial killers have trauma related to their mothers, even overbearing and or neglectful, and female serial killers issues with their fathers, mommy and daddy issues. Yeah, definitely. I definitely see that a lot as well. I've always been very interested in serial killers because at the end of the day, it's very interesting to know how somebody could just have just this blatant disregard for human life. And I've noticed with a lot of serial killers too that they love animals. They love animals. John Wayne Gacy, he loved animals. Adolf Hitler loved fucking animals, okay? Charles Manson, he loved animals. So many serial killers love animals. Even right here you hear Carla, she loved animals as well. But they it's like human life doesn't matter to them. It's very, very weird. It's very intriguing, and I think that's why people, it's just so mysterious to try to figure out, why would you do this, like trying to find the logic in it. And the sad part about it is you never really do, because yes, it's very, very hard to understand how one person can have this horrible childhood and turn out to be perfectly fine, successful in life, an outstanding member of society, and then you have somebody who has trauma in life and they turn out to be a serial killer. Okay, where the hell did I leave off? I think I'm getting another cold, probably from one of my kids, or maybe it's allergies. I don't know. But anyway, inappropriately, in his view, she was participating in therapy sessions set up for the employees of the Shaver Clinic, a chronic care hospital where she now worked. These sessions were designed to help her coworkers cope with the trauma that rocked all of St. Catherine's in the wake of the crimes. Given Carla's predicament, not to mention her involvement, Dorothy Homolka's participation seemed woefully ill advised, even dim, or perhaps just crazy. Dorothy Homolka went on to tell Dr. A how, as a teenager, Carla and her friends had hung out around the pool a lot, listening to music and talking. Carla had always worked part time as a telephone solicitor for a local photography company briefly. Otherwise, she was employed in the summers as a nanny for a neighbor with two young boys. There was another darker side to Carla, though, that Dr. A did not hear about how she was in grade 7. With an average of 86%, Carla did something she would never do over and over again. She inscribed a book. Okay, basically she wrote on a book and gave it to her friend. In and in of itself, this was an innocent enough, except the books were always a certain type. In this instance, it was a brainchild of B.F. Skinner inspired horror stories about behavioral psychologists who program human beings for their own nefarious purposes. The recipient of Carla's largest was impressionable, portly girl named Amanda Watling. Okay. Carla graduated from grade 8 with an 84% average. There is a snapshot of Carla and her two girlfriends taken in the school gymnasium just prior to the graduation ceremonies. Carla is in the middle and has her arm around each of the girls' shoulders. One girl looks decidedly happy, okay, and the other quite radiant. They are all wearing glossy pastel polyester party dresses. Carla is the only one wearing a corsage, okay? The other girl didn't look so happy though. On the back of the photograph, Carla inscribed, it said, "Oh, me and my bestest buddies, Vicky and Lisa." Poor Lisa, she's been crying over some guy named Tom. What I am planning, there's that devilish glint in my eyes. June 21st, 1984. This is actually what she wrote. When Carla started grade 9, her own struggle with math and science dragged her down a bit. Sir Winston Churchill Secondary School was the largest in St. Catherine's, and she was no longer the only pretty blonde in the school. Her grades remained average, but her attention began to wander. Not atypically, Carla rebelled and challenged parental authority, such as it was. There was a few rules in the Homolka household, a few. Although her parents allowed Carla to drink, she was not allowed to car date, go out with boys in cars. Hardly Czechoslovakia under Alexander Dubik, but it was enough to set off an increasingly independent-minded Carla. Carla's friends remember regular arguments, particularly with her father, whom they perceived to be as strong and, willful as Carla. Others who were closer to the family, such as the Andersons next door, saw a different kind of family. Let's put it that way. One more in keeping with Dr. A's impression of Mr. Homolka, this version portrays Carol as a man collectively in a household completely dominated by women. Pretty much. Carla had her sister Lori regularly told their father to fuck off and called him a dumb Czechoslovakia. They called him dumb all the time. They pretty much couldn't stand him in a lot of ways. He would flee the kitchen for refuge in the basement. On the other hand, Carol Homolka had a reputation for a wandering eye. When Linda Willis, one of Dorothy's friends, pay attention to this part very closely. When Linda Willis, one of Dorothy's friends, and a colleague from the Shaver Clinic, and this is where Marilyn worked, which is Carla's mother. Oh, I had to put it on mute real quick. From Shaver Clinic, was in the process of a divorce. Marilyn's friend was in the process of a divorce. Carol came to her. He started hanging around at her apartment building. Once he managed to get past the security system and pounded on her door, all the while professing his affection. Okay. When Linda finally agreed to meet him at a bar to sort things out, Carol announced that he was in love with her and planned to leave Dorothy and move in with her. Carol's nickname among the women at the clinic was the pervert. Linda said he earned it because he always wanted to take you to bed. Dorothy told Linda that she was relieved when Carol went away on business because he always wanted S all the time. Linda had only tolerated the man for Dorothy's sake. She certainly never encouraged him. It always struck her as odd that the man could hardly speak English after spending more than 3 decades in Canada. The I'm in love with you thing put it way over the top for her. I told him, hey, I'm in the middle of a divorce. The last thing I want is another man in my life, especially my friend's husband, Linda recalled. So basically, Carol confessed his love to his own wife's best friend. His own wife's best friend. And of course, she shut him down. She wasn't having it. Okay. Linda she's going through a divorce. And Carol was known as the pervert. People looked to him as a pervert. And that's something that could be very much, these are all things that these 2 serial killers witnessed in their childhood. Okay. So she sent Carol home and told him to keep his mouth shut. The next day, Dorothy approached Linda at work. Carol had told her everything. So when Carol went home, he told his wife everything. And he told her how he was in love with her best friend. Okay? He was in love with Linda. At Linda's apartment that evening, Dorothy said she did not think Carol was in love with Linda, but there was an infatuation. So she went to her best friend's apartment and said, the husband's not really in love with you. It's just, it's just an infatuation. To Dorothy, this meant there was trouble in her marriage, and her marriage was all important to her. So this is what Dorothy said to her best friend, Linda. She said, you could save my marriage if you would sleep with both of us. Dorothy suggested to a startled Linda, her best friend, who politely but firmly declined. Linda's relationship with Dorothy was never the same after that. That's also something that should give up red flags. This mother, Carla's mother, Dorothy, is literally asking her own best friend for a menage a trois with her husband because her husband is infatuated with her. That's crazy. In the meantime, Carla was developing an interest in the occult. Her friend Amanda remembers that they used to light candles and burn incense all the time. Carla advertised in newspapers for Ouija boards. There was a talk about spirits and the screaming tunnels that were located somewhere down near the railway tracks outside of the town. Carla took a very deep interest in wearing black, dyeing her hair different colors every other day and changing its styles often. She wore heavy dark eye makeup. When we were in high school, she was a little rebel, you know. Her close friends, Debbie Purdy, recalled her wearing a lot of black nail polish. She wore the long johns and the boxer shorts. Nobody ever told Carla what to do. She was her own person and her own boss. Another classmate, Ayana Brindle, noticed strange carve marks, like almost like a sacrifice or something on Carla's arm. It appeared that circles had been carved into her skin and then filled with nail polish. Not sure why she did that, but Carla also inscribed a book called Michelle Remembers, and it was to Iona, published in 1980. It was one of the first true stories about recovered memory, Satanism, and graphic sexual abuse, co-authored by the victim patient Michelle Smith and her therapist. Carla's inscription in that book simply read, "There's always something more left to say." Carla admitted to Dr. A that she smoked a little dope and once popped an upper called White Cross, probably contraband, Ritalin. And this all happened in grade 10, you guys. She told him that it really made her feel good, but then she crashed and had to call in sick for work at the number one, it's called the number one pet center in the Penn Center Mall, where she was working part-time. Her mother was not aware of any illicit drug use, just drinking at home with friends. Obviously, her parents allowed her to drink. In grade 11, Carla was 12, in grade 12. But wait, I wrote this wrong. In grade 11, Carla was accelerated to grade 12. Okay, so they moved her to grade 12, but I think that they looked at that like that was a mistake because of the way that she acts and her behavior. Even though she liked to dissect frogs, she only got 65% in biology, barely passing in history. She managed high marks in English and scored 80% in her law class. Her language skills were such that she acted as a French tutor for her less adept peers, which French is a very hard language to learn, but Carla is very fluent in English still till this day. Tracy Collins, another friend, saw Carla as a 30-year-old in a 17-year-old's body. One afternoon, in the cafeteria, Carla whispered to Tracy in her ear, "You know what I'd like to do? I like to put dots all over someone's body and take a knife and then connect the dots and then pour vinegar all over their body." This is something that she whispered to her best friend in the cafeteria. So imagine you're just sitting there in the cafeteria and someone says to you, "You want to know what I want to do? I want to take a knife, put holes in someone's body, or put holes in someone's body and take a knife and connect the dots and then pour vinegar all over it." What would you do? Like how would you react to that? Like, what would you say? I don't even know what I would say. I would just probably be in shock. So mind you, these things I'm reading to you about her history is important when we move on to the next part of this case, because the media they portray Carla, they portray obviously Paul as having this hard life, this tumultuous life and very toxic life with a horrible father and a horrible mother. But they always make Carla Homolka look like she had this wonderful life. She had all the privileges in the world. She could have done something so much better with her life, and her parents were supportive and very happily married. But when you look deeper, it's not like that. And I think it's very interesting how the media makes it seem like Carla has had this perfect life and just totally ruined it for herself. And I don't think so. I don't think that this is a perfect person. I don't think that this is a person who had a perfect life. I think she also had a very, very toxic, unstable life, by watching her parents. What type of parent says to her best friend, what type of mother says to her best friend, hey, you want to have a menage a trois with us? Like, there are things, underlying issues that happen throughout Carla's life where the media needs to quit portraying her as that, this perfect Barbie that had this perfect life, because she didn't. Not in my opinion. It was a very, very dysfunctional life, in my opinion. Carla started going with a guy in her typing class, Doug. His name was Doug. As remember, Carla, as she was generally perceived, particularly by the boys, as different, it was hard to say exactly how. The culture of Sir Winston Churchill secondary school reflected the culture of the town, a white, male, dominant, working class, heterosexual jock. Doug appreciated Carla's moodiness and found the fact that she was consumed by the thought of death interesting, which I don't know how that would be interesting. She was constantly threatening the S word, but he doubted her sincerity. I don't think he really thought she was going to go through with it, but she definitely talked about it a lot. Like, she was obsessed with death. Doug wasn't the only one who noticed she was obsessed with death. Carla inscribed Lynn Cretney was one of Carla's friends, and she inscribed in her yearbook, and it says, this is what Carla inscribed in her friend's yearbook. S kicks, and fasting is awesome. Bones rule, death rules. Death kicks. I love death. Kill the fucking world. Lynn never figured that one out. All of Carla's close girlfriends looked the same, okay? The three of them, Kathy Wilson, Debbie Purdy, and Lisa Stanton, were around 5'5", 110 pounds, with perm blonde hair. They dressed a little punk, although pop culture in a town such as St. Catharines was ignorance of Iggy Pop, Lou Reed, or even, Sid Vicious and the Sex Pistols. Soon they would form a little clique, and it was called the Exclusive Diamond Club. Its charter was simple: recruit rich, slightly older men who were hunks, get a diamond, marry, and live happily ever after. Carla was the tough one in the bunch, as Kathy Wilson put it. Carla had a pair of real handcuffs with keys and everything, because she had ended up getting those or stealing them from a police officer. Dorothy Homolka told Dr. A her daughter wanted to be a librarian. Okay. That's a lie. She told him about Carla's enthusiasm for gymnastics and figure skating, terminated when she fractured her foot at the age of 13. Carla left the gymnasium and the arena behind for theater. She joined the dance club and took a serious interest in acting, participating in school variety shows and musicals. For 3 years, she studied music, taking voice and singing lessons, and ironically, she categorically refused to sing in front of her class. When it was her turn to perform solo, Carla just chickened out, okay? Pretty much. If the assignment was particularly demanding, she would actually leave the room and be embarrassed. On May 4th, 1987, Carla celebrated her 17th birthday poolside with the members of the exclusive Diamond Club. And Tracy Collins, who had been intrigued by Carla ever since the whole connect the dots thing that she wrote, okay, which is just crazy. Other friends, including Amanda Watling, had fallen by the wayside. Amanda liked sports. Carla liked lying perfectly still in the sun, listening to Beastie Boys. You got to fight for your right to party. Which I used to like that song too. By July, Tracy Collins' parents had enough. They forbade her to keep company with Carla. Tracy had failed 2 courses, and the Collins, they just did not like the way their daughter was changing under the influence of the strange and demurring Homolka girl. Like, they just didn't like it. Tracy was not the only one lost to Carla. Her new boyfriend moved to Kansas. They corresponded, but Carla did not see her lost love again until she took matters into her own hands around mid-August. In defiance of her parents, she purchased a plane ticket and just decided to fly to Kansas for 2 weeks without even asking her parents, okay? And then when she got to Kansas, she called her parents and said, "Hey, I know you guys told me no, that I couldn't go to Kansas to see my boyfriend, but I chose to go anywhere, and I chose to go anyway, and I'll be back in 2 weeks." Carla told Dr. A that she and her boyfriend did the C word, Coke, Diet Coke, whatever you want to call it, just a little, and Carla lost her virginity. At least she had called home, Carla told the doctor. According to what the boy in Kansas later told the police and what Carla told Dr. A, there was nothing unusual about the intercourse. It was just intercourse. But then when she got to the girlfriends together in the beginning of the semester in September, Carla told tales of sadistic orgies with bondage and hard spankings. Carla began grade 12, but quickly became disaffected. She decided to only take 2 courses and work full-time instead. Carla approached Christy Mann, the youthful store manager at the number 1 pet center, and implied that Christy was something of a role model for her. Young, pretty, engaged, employed, Carla's part-time job became full-time. Even better, Carla's fellow Diamond Clubber, Debbie Purdy, took over her old part-time position. In October 1987, Carla and Debbie were invited to go to a convention in Toronto for people who were involved in the pet industry. It was being held at the Howard Johnson East Hotel in Scarborough, a large suburb on the eastern boundary of Toronto. The way Carla told it is that to Dr. A, she went to the convention with her friend Debbie. Then they went out to a club, came back and met Paul and his friends in the coffee shop. They invited the boys up to their room to watch a movie, but Carla ended up having intercourse with Paul instead. That was it. The first time I met him, I knew I would marry him, Carla said. And this is what she told Dr. A, of course. You know, how Carla describes Paul is that he puts you under a spell. She fell in love that night. And she added, of course, there's no excuse for the things that they've done, but he swept her completely off of her feet. And we'll leave it at that till part 2. So the reason why, like I told you guys, that I wanted to go in depth with their childhood is because that was an accident. Is because it's important. The only way that you can really, really deeply get to know people is to take it to their past. And I think it's important because I think there's a lot of things, obviously, that you learned from listening to the things that happened in the past. They both were very, very much a product of their environment, right? I feel like, you know, it's funny to me how ignorant the media thinks that people are when they describe Carla and her life, and when they describe how, how wonderful her life was and how successful her parents were and how happy her parents were. And then you look deeper and it's not so much like that. And I think the media definitely kind of relies on the ignorance of some people, but it's not hard to read books and to do deeper research, and then you realize, no, wait, she didn't have such of a great childhood. She obviously was a very, very dark person, even as a teenager. To sit there, these key moments that I feel like are very important, and I think it's great that they chose to interview her childhood friends and things like that, because to sit there and inscribe in a yearbook, I want to put holes all over somebody's body and connect the dots with the knife, that's dark, you guys. If you even paid attention, even some of the books that Carla Homolka read were very dark. We all know about Paul and how Paul, to me, obviously was destined to be who he is, I think, to be a serial killer. But when it comes to Carla, it can be very complex, especially when you know what happens towards the end. Okay? So I feel like the media needs to quit making so many excuses as far as like, oh, she was just this beautiful woman in some kind of diamond cutter club that she started. No, Paula Homolka was actually a very dark person. And I think because when she went to Kansas to see her boyfriend, who ended up moving, just like the guy said, it was just, she lost her virginity and it was just intercourse. It was nothing spectacular. It was just intercourse. But then she comes home and she tells her friends it was filled with sadistic orgies, right? Well, for her to describe it in that way, I would assume that that means these are things that were deep within her, things that she wanted to experience. Carla was looking for someone, okay, even as a teenager, once she started dating, I think she was looking for someone who was very, very dominant. She was looking for someone who was dangerous, who was going to keep her on the edge of her seat. And because she has this type A personality, she always got her way. She has always told people, like her father, she would tell him to fuck off. She would, make fun of him, okay? And he would run downstairs to the basement. She always got her way. She always was able to cuss people out. There are stories about even when Carla was young and little girls would come to the house, her friends in the neighborhood would come to the house and play Barbies with her. Carla was the one who always set up the scene. Carla was the one who always said what was going to happen with the Barbies and here's how things are going to go. And if they didn't go how she wanted it to go, she would stop everything and stop playing and go in a corner somewhere and huff and puff. Okay? This is a person who was very, very much knew what she wanted, very confident, but in the same sense, also very insecure. As I look into and continue to look into Carla and her as a person, I also see very much that she was very, not ODD, OCD, and everything always had to be her way. And if things didn't go her way, she would go crazy. Okay. But then you have this type A personality, okay, who then meets a dominant type A personality. You have this woman who's so used to getting her way all the time, and she meets someone who doesn't give her way, who puts her in her place. He's the one who tells her how things are going to go. Okay. He's the one who tells her, look, either you do it my way or you will go the highway. And I think that's what a lot of people, when you do research, those are things, a conclusion that you may come up with, or you may come up with something different. And if you have something different to add, obviously leave it in the comments below. But I think it's very interesting to see how the media portrays Carla, and I'm talking about her childhood, versus how I don't think it's true. I think the media is just kind of solely going based off of Carla's looks and what is shown pretty much on the outside, and they're not looking deeper into this woman. And how I'm looking at it is, she was very dark from the very beginning, and she had very, very much fantasies of this type of these types of sexual encounters. Okay. A match made in hell. Exactly. Strong-willed personalities can be very controlling and manipulative. Absolutely. And I think the things that they have done, you guys, it gets deeper, obviously. And all the books that I have read, I will link them down, including the book that I'm taking from now. I will leave it in the description below. It's an amazing book. I love the 2 books that I've read. One of them is one that I've read from the past. But what I will say is that from the research that I've done and the documentaries that I have watched, I think people, obviously I can't go too far because I don't want to get completely demonetized on the video, but it's going to be demonetized anyway. I think it's important for you guys to know the details, the graphic details of what they did to their victims, the graphic details of what Paul did to his victims, and how he inevitably, okay, came to a point when he meets this woman, how he turns to just a rapist to a murderer. And it's important to always keep in mind that Paul Bernardo did not start murdering until he met Carla. That's something that you always need to keep in mind, because there are going to be times, especially when we get to part 2, and I probably am not going to wait until Thursday to get to part 2. I will try to do part 2 tomorrow. But what I will say is that there are going to be times where you feel bad for Carla. And there are a lot of people who, till this day, defends Carla. Homolka. They defend her. They think that she was in an abusive relationship and she was forced to do the things that she does. However, once I get into the graphic details of the things that truly happened behind closed doors, of the innocent younger, okay, these minors that they took home and violated, demeaned, all of those things, okay, the graphic details, once I get into those details, you might not feel so bad for that woman. Because to me, and I promise you, in my opinion, Carla Homolka is worse. She's worse than Paul. I will stand by that. And the fact that everything that happened with this case and the sweetheart deal that Carla got, I feel very uncomfortable to know that this is a woman that's out here in the world. She's worse. She is way worse than he is. That's just my opinion. And there are so many people that feel differently. And if you feel differently, feel free to leave it down in the comments. I would love to have that conversation with you. But that's just how I feel. I feel she was horrible. She is way worse. She is a way worse kind of evil than Paul was. Okay? So let's read some comments here. Thank you guys for staying and listening. I love you guys. Some say the devil is quite charming. Yes. Some say the devil looks like no one you would ever think, with the most angelic face and everything. And then obviously evil. But they say that there are so many stories, and I am also going to do different stories like towards Halloween. When Halloween comes, and there are stories that I've heard of people when they see uh, a demon, or even a story of a person who says that they've seen the devil himself, and they said that it was the most attractive man they have ever seen in their life. But literally, when they seen the devil, and according to them seeing the devil, and this was a time when they were struggling with addiction and they were trying to get better. One of the things that this devil had said is, never mind, we'll talk about it another day, but it's a very interesting story. I have some pretty good stories when it comes to that. Obviously sad, but good stories that turn out in a happy ending. But I will say, they do say the devil is the most attractive. And of course, I mean, if you follow the Bible, and this is no offense to anybody who doesn't, I do, but even this story is something that my mom used to tell me. The devil used to be an angel and was the most attractive angel in heaven, okay, before he was casted out from jealousy and to hell. Okay, so let me read some comments. Okay, I just emailed you. Okay. What what would I say if a friend said to me? I'd say, bye, bitch. Right? Like, I just don't understand how anybody can put that in a yearbook. Like, obviously, that's gonna follow you for the rest of your life, and it obviously did follow her. I mean, that's just disgusting to even say. That's demented. But that just shows you her train of thought, and the way that this woman thought, as she grew into womanhood and all of these things. This was always a very dark woman. Okay. Some say, okay, I read that. It is so eye-opening to hear about they and their families grew up so much valuable information that helps bring to light what happens in later years. Thank you, Heather. I appreciate that. The media in Canada, from what I recall, never cover their past to this extent. No, but they should, because what they're trying to have people believe is that Carla just had this wonderful life. And I feel like underneath the surface, she really didn't. The things that she watched, ultimately, menage a trois and things like that. Like, who knows the things that her parents have done that Carla witnessed growing up, She had darkness in her eyes. In that picture, she was just darkness, period. I agree, ASAP. I agree. Strong-willed personalities can be controlling and manipulative. I think it's interesting how they both have these type A, very controlling personalities, and then these two personalities collide, and look what happened, Teaya is doing a fantastic job. As a Canadian who lived through this horror, I have learned more about them from Teaya than I did from my own local news and newspapers. That's awesome, Heather. I want to visit Canada one day. It's crazy to know that this happened in Canada, and they are literally labeled as the most notorious serial killer couple ever. And I do find it very interesting, like I told you guys in the beginning, how serial killer couples they do the most horrific crimes more than actual, like, a person who is working on their own, which I also find very interesting. It takes two to tango, absolutely. Tia, are you still going to do the members only live tomorrow? Yes. If it changes, I will let you guys know, because it's hard for me to go live during the day. But more than likely, I will be Care Bear for sure. Yes, she is. She's a monster. Absolutely. She is a monster living amongst us with no consequences from the Canadian judicial system at all. It's crazy. Like, you guys, this story, it pisses me off so bad. And it's so nice to have someone from Canada watching. And, if you're watching the replay and you're from Canada, please let me know in the comments below. Like, seriously, because like, I can't imagine how that made you guys feel when she pretty much got away with it. You know what I'm saying? She did. In my opinion, she did. 12 years ain't shit compared to what she did. I truly feel like she enabled him, and you're going to be surprised at what I think happened with this. I really, it's crazy. It's just crazy. You guys will see. My mom said the same thing about the devil being an angel. Absolutely. The devil was once an angel, and one of the most attractive angels in heaven. So that speaks volumes about, if you ever come across the devil, he is going to be disguised as one of the most attractive people ever. Okay. It's not all about looks, you guys. Come and visit us anytime. We would love to have you. I do want to visit Canada one day. Hopefully within the next couple years, I will. Who's not following her around 24/7, watching her every move? It's crazy. And we'll get into that towards the end about how they have a Facebook group that's called Watching Carla Homolko or something like that. And then it's a very controversial Facebook group because it's literally kind of stalking her, but in the same sense, it's fucking what she deserves. She deserves not to have a peaceful moment for the rest of her fucking life. Okay? That's just how I feel. Call me, and it's crazy to read. I want to read some things to you. Okay? I do. But hold on 1 second here. I'm going to bring this up. Let me bring this up, and you're going to hear silence for a second while I bring it up. I'm going to have to bring this up in part 2 because if I bring it up now, then it's going to kind of ruin the rest of the story. But I also want to read to you some of the things that people say in defense of Carla, okay? And I think it's interesting because there are still some people who really think that she is innocent. But once I continue on with this story, you're going to see that she's not. She's a horrible, horrible human being that should have spent the rest of her life in prison as well. So 1 second here. Besides her attorneys. Hold on, let me bring this up, you guys. Excuse me, I will show you this here. Before we wrap this up, I will show you this. Okay, so the name of this site is Where is Carla Homolko Now? Okay, and it pretty much shows right here. This is an interview that she did, and I'm pretty sure it was somewhere in France because, like I told you, she's very fluent in French. And it was an interview she did in French. Ironically, you couldn't do an interview in English. I'm just saying. It says Carla Homolko received what many Canadians believe to be the worst plea deal in Canada history. Many familiar with her case opine that Carla deserved a harsher punishment for her role in the rape and murders of Leslie Mahaffey, Kristen French, and her own sister, Tammy Homolka. Carla laid most of the blame on her ex-husband, somehow convincing the Crown to hand her a 12 years in prison. Homolka's assertions that her ex-husband Paul Bernardo forced her into participating in the crimes seemed false after the video evidence surfaced showing the pair drugging Tammy Homolka before Paul arred her. Paul continues to confess to more crimes while serving his life sentence. Therefore, it's conceivable that the true extent of Carla's crimes never came to light. I hate these advertisements. Carla lives an everyday life with her husband and their 3 fucking children. She has 3 children, you guys. 3 children. Okay? Carla Homolka changed her name to Leanne Teal and currently lives in Quebec with her husband and their 3 children. Prison authorities released Carla Homolka on the 4th of July, 2005. The then 35-year-old married, his name is Thierry Bordelis, her former lawyer's brother. Shortly after her release, Carla and her family lived in the Antilles and Guadeloupe before relocating to their current home, Quebec. Carla's release proved widely unpopular with the Canadian public. In August 2005, she found employment at a hardware store in a suburb of Montreal. Her boss later revealed her address to the media and alleged that Carla had violated the terms of her release by contacting someone with a criminal record. The boss also alleged that Carla had come into contact with children. In November 2005, a Superior Court judge granted Carla to reprieve by ruling that she didn't pose a risk to the community. The judge found fault in the lower court's ruling that imposed restrictions on Carla without sufficient evidence to justify the restrictions. By lifting the restrictions, Justice James Bruton allowed Carla to live, work, and move around Canada without notifying authorities. Justice Bruton's decision also allowed her to contact criminals, her ex-husband, and their family of her victims. That's wow. So she could contact her ex-husband and the family of, wow. The possibly that Ms. Teal might reoffend one day cannot be completely eliminated. However, her development over the past 12 years demonstrates on a balance of probabilities that it is unlikely to occur. She does not represent an imminent danger to commit a personal injury offense. Carla might be free, but she lives under the watchful eye of the public. Reports that she occasionally volunteers at kids' schools sparked outrage and forced the school to end the arrangement. Thierry Brodelis, Carla's husband, remains pretty much he doesn't care about the community's complaints. If they are worried, this is his quote. He says, if they are worried, all they have to do is move, Brodelis told La Presse. We're free. We're in a free country. Has anything happened over the past 10 years? So why are they worried? I don't see why they're worried. Homolka has failed to block the media from revealing her whereabouts. Several days before her release, a judge denied Homolka's request to prohibit the media from revealing details about her life after her release. Carla sunk under the radar for several years as she lived in the Antilles and Caribbean island of Guadeloupe. Journalist Paula Todd found her, but few in Guadeloupe cared about her identity. Everything changed after Carla moved to Canada in 2014. In 2016, residents of Canada expressed concern over Carla's residence in their town. Politicians discussed the issue with Montreal MP Mark Miller, stating that the government would not look into the report. So basically, this woman is free with three children. And yeah, it says she's allowed to contact her ex-husband and the victims' families. Okay? What is this? I think this is like a little playing of her. No, I don't know. That might be an ad thing. In a radio interview with Radio Canada, Carla stated that she deserved privacy because she considered herself a victim of Paul Bernardo's. She pleaded for empathy as, at the time of the crime, she was a vulnerable teenager, she said. At the time when I was 17 years old, I lacked knowledge. I feared being abandoned. I was desperate for a relationship. I lacked confidence. There are numerous aspects of myself that I was unaware of at the time, but now I'm aware of. No. Okay, so yeah, she was 17 when she met Paul. Okay, but then you became a grown woman. And as you guys will see, as I get into the specific details of this case, there are so many times that Carla Homolka could have saved their victims, and she chose not to. I refuse to sit here and believe this woman by saying that she was just this vulnerable teenager. She wasn't a vulnerable teenager. Yes, when she met him, she was a vulnerable teenager, but then she became a woman, okay? And all of the things that she did to these children, in my opinion, because they were children, all of the things that she did, she is the one who could have stopped it. That's why I say she's the worst. No, dude, you should find a desert island and stay there with your damn wife. I say she should not have been released in the first place. She doesn't deserve to, she just doesn't deserve to be walking free with 3 kids, having a wonderful life, but yet her sister, Leslie, okay, and what's the other one's name? Those 3 children, they didn't get to live their lives, okay? They died of a horrific death inflicted upon her and her husband. She doesn't deserve to be here. Okay, I'm talking about she doesn't deserve to be walking free with 3 children, living her life after she took the lives of innocent children. That's how I feel. She belongs in prison, rotting in there, right where her ex-husband is. Okay, I cannot stand that woman. Okay, and yes, the Facebook group is controversial, but you want to know what? Yeah, they're kind of stalking her, but people have a right to know. Just because you may think it's unlikely for her to reoffend, how do you know? We don't know. We don't know if it's unlikely for her to reoffend. You just never know. She can't be trusted. She's disgusting, and I don't think she deserves any privacy at all. That's just my opinion. May the ghost, okay? I hope they haunt her victims haunt her for the rest of her fucking life. That's how I feel about Carla Homolka. Okay? Yes, I can't stand Paul. He's a horrible person, but he's in prison, rotting away in there. She's not. She doesn't deserve to be having this happy life with a husband. Like, even just think about it, you guys. Somebody married this woman. There are single women out there who are beautiful, educated, okay? Who have so much going for themselves, and they can't even find the right person. But yet you have Carla Homolka, okay, who literally single-handedly helped her own husband rape and murder 3 innocent children, okay? And she finds someone to marry her. Please, like, how does that happen? It's crazy to me. I agree, Teaya. I'm just making a remark to get husband. Oh, I know what you mean. I'm just saying, ultimately, I think she just does not deserve to be out of prison. That deal was the worst deal ever made in history. I truly agree with that. Living the life with 2.5 kids and a hubby, it's wrong. It is. I'm shocked nobody has attempted to harm her, right? And they might have, and we just don't know about it. But, like I said, they do say that the Facebook group is very controversial because it kind of follows her. It's called Tracking Carla or something like that. And they always know where she is. And to be honest with you, normally I may say, hey, this isn't right. No, I don't think she deserves any privacy, in my opinion. She doesn't deserve to have any privacy, any rights, since you go ahead and the way that this whole deal happened, you guys, was very much manipulated. You guys will see that. I can't wait to finish this whole story with you guys because I can't wait to see what you guys think about the entire thing. So, just it's crazy. It's a very, very crazy story, and I'm excited to get deeper into the story with you guys. So I just wanted to take it back so you guys could get a little bit of an idea how how Paul Bernardo grew up and how Carla Homolka grew up, their past, the things that they witnessed from their parents. And then tomorrow we are going to talk about when they met each other and when all of this tragedy started. Okay. It's always the filming of their vanity that gets them in the end. They have I agree, they have definitely said, which is also something that's very interesting to you guys, but in Canada, they say that Paul and Carla's relationship is the most well-documented relationship in the history of serial killers because they documented everything, you guys. They documented the torture and rape of their victims. They documented their whole relationship from when they got married until they ended up ultimately being caught for what they did. So it's going to be very interesting when we get to part 2. The devil takes care of his too, I guess. It's true. Where she lives is an upscale area too. She doesn't deserve to have an upscale area. She just, she makes me sick. She really does. I have no empathy for her. If I was literally in front of her, I'm not going to lie to you, I would punch her in her fucking face. I do not like that woman. And that's where I get violent because she does not deserve to have this wonderful life when she took the lives of 3 innocent little girls, including her own sister. Her own sister, you guys. That's what's so crazy about this case. It does. It makes me sick too, Heather. I'm sure it makes you extremely upset because it happened where you live, Like, shame on the police officers. You are also going to see that this was the most horrible work from the detectives, the police officers, all of them. It was very, very horrible police work. Like, there are so many times that Paul Bernardo could have been caught even prior to him meeting Carla. And it shows you, and we're going to end it on this. It ultimately shows you how looks alone can get you very, very far. And it's unfortunate. And you should never rely solely on your looks. You should always make sure that you are educated, make sure that you strive to be a good person on the inside and to be beautiful on the inside and all of those things. You should never rely solely on your looks, but it does show you guys how looks literally can take you very far, and they can also be very deceiving. And to me, police officers should know that. They should know that. They should know how deceiving looks can be. Looks are still deceiving till this day towards this couple, which is why they are called the Ken and Barbie killers, because it's very, very interesting how to watch the horrible police work that has happened throughout the course of Paul Bernardo raping 18 women and then ultimately murdering 3. And it's something that could have been prevented so many times, but police officers couldn't get past his looks, in my opinion. That's where I think he kind of slid under their radar, the way he looked. Okay, there's a lot of privilege in looking good. Exactly. Thank you, Victoria. You took the words right out of my mouth. There's a lot of privilege in being an attractive person. Okay, and you guys are going to see that in part 2. Hill is too good for people to like her. You mean Carla, Victoria? How does she sleep at night? The ghosts aren't haunting hard enough. We don't know. They could be, like you just don't know. I hope that they're haunting her every night, every day. And you're going to see she had some experiences with that too. So thank you guys for listening. This turtleneck's driving me crazy. I love true crime, and I'm so happy that you guys voted. I'm actually going to be doing another poll to see what other serial killer couple you would like to see next, because I'm definitely going to be doing Ian and what's her name? Myra. Terrible police work. I lived in Toronto and worked in Scarborough. At the time, it was a nightmare for my coworkers, and I sense we worked shifts. The police were so lax in their investigation, so lackadaisical, so naive, very just the things that they could have done. There are so many people who knew. There are so many people who reported. His own friends had given the police officers more ammo to get rid of this man, and it just they could have taken him down so many times, and they couldn't. And then once he met Carla, it's almost as if she enabled him even more, and it became so much. There's just so much that could have been done. There's so much that could have been done, and they literally just horrible police work. So we will continue the rest of this probably tomorrow. If not tomorrow, then Saturday, because I do want to continue this case. I don't want to leave you guys until next Thursday to come to the conclusion. So I will probably be back on here tomorrow. I love doing this, you guys. So I hope that you guys enjoy too. Like I said, I'm going to be doing a poll. Probably tomorrow, I'm going to do a poll to see which serial couple you would want to see next. Very interesting. So I love you guys so much. I hope you guys have an amazing night. Thank you so much for being here and listening to me. I always love doing these types of things. I think it's so much fun. It's fun to do true crime. I don't necessarily say that it's fun doing the research, because I'm not going to lie to you guys, as I'm continuing to even read this book, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking, and true crime can take you to a place that can be very, hard on you mentally. So I give credit to the true crime content creators, thanks to Stephanie Harlow, because I watched her documentary, thanks to Crime Time, thanks to the books that I'm looking at, especially the one that I'm reading now, Invisible Darkness. Thank you to him, because that's where most of this I'm getting. I'm literally reading it to you guys, and then some of it I've made into my own. All of the documentaries, there's mostly every true crime channel has reported on this case, and some have done it better than others. But I'm very blessed to be doing this, because I love it. I think it's awesome to be able to do research. So we will continue this tomorrow, and I love you guys. Thank you for being supportive of me. Thank you for being here. Make sure you give me a like or a thumbs down, thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever. It's all interaction, baby. You guys are amazing. And make sure, if you're new, make sure you subscribe before you leave. If you haven't already, if you're a replay watcher, please let me know down in the comments below. And also, please let me know if you're from Canada, and if you remember specific details of this case and what happened. As far as how did you feel as you watched this whole thing play out? In Canada, the court, even with the courts, Paul Bernardo's case, I think, lasted, when it was tried in front of the court, it lasted for 4 months? So yes, let me know down in the comments below. Love you guys so much, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Have an amazing night. Stay beautiful and stay blessed. Deuces. Love y'all. Bye.
I can feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight, got pride, got reason. If they wanna go eat, then you know I'm gon' feed them. If you're coming for me, hope you're ready for a demon. I got eyes in the back of my head, I'm seeing. Take me for granted and you know I'm leaving. I'ma take what's mine with the webs I'm weaving. I could take this crowd from seeing to believing. Got a taste for blood and my tongue keeps bleeding from the words I spit. So sharp, so